Hey team, Richard Tubb here, back with another episode of Tubb Talk, the podcast for IT consultants. Now, long-time listeners to this show will know that one of my goals of this podcast show is to highlight the cutting-edge tech that is positively disrupting the managed service provider industry. So today I'm speaking to someone who has over 15 years of experience in working with MSPs. He's a seasoned startup founder, and he's built a platform that I think will be very interesting to managed service provider owners. Michael Lawson, welcome to Tubb Talk.
Good to be here. Nice to meet you.
You're joining us fairly late in the day, working day, because you're joining us from across there in New Zealand. So first of all, thank you for staying up late to speak to me. It's early in the morning here in Newcastle upon Tyne, England, and later for you. But how is New Zealand today?
Exhausting today. It's we're in the middle of summer, so it's actually pretty hot, which is a bit surprising.
Yeah,
New Zealand. It's nice climate most of the time, but the last few days it's been stinking. So.
It's a place I've never visited, but yeah, when it's very hot, we've only got limited sympathy for you, Michael, because it's like -3 in Newcastle upon Tyne at the moment. So,
look, I'll take that any day. I'll take that any day.
Well, before we jump into your latest innovation, Movebot, I wanted to elaborate a little bit on my introduction there. So tell us a bit more, if you would, about your 15-year journey in managed services.
Yeah, sure. I mean, my 15-year journey has been, I guess, working with managed services companies across both of the startups that I've founded. And then early in my career, I spent a lot of time on the ground working for a couple of sort of telco / managed service providers, because it was a while ago. So the MSP space hadn't really developed then, but I've been playing with tech ever since. I think I can remember when I was 10 or 11, building websites and mucking around with computers and pulling stuff to pieces and whatnot. So yeah, so my journey in managed services began when I was relatively young. My first few jobs were with MSPs, and then I have a real love for building stuff, and so I've been tinkering around with software development and whatnot for since I was quite young, and so gravitated more towards that side of things. And the previous startup that I built was a company called Linewise, and we did network firewalls for schools, so really high on the reporting and analytics and whatnot. And built that over a few years, and then exited to an Australian company called Family Zone. And at that point, I said, that was kind of fun. Going to do it again, and saw another problem in file transfers. Starting with SFTP, I needed to sort of be able to push files around via SFTP, and then came across this problem with migrations. And I mean, data moving, it's quite a boring sort of thing. There's nothing exciting about migrating data. But oddly enough, it was one of those things that was actually really, really hard, especially when there's scale involved. And so, yeah, we started looking at this problem and started to build a solution for it. And yeah, we're quite excited about where it's going. And again, it's not the most interesting thing in the world, migrations, but you've got to be very, very sure when you're moving data for a customer or a client that it's going to work, and that there's not going to be any data loss or corruption. Everything's going to appear where it should be in the destination and in a timely fashion. And so that's kind of where we've got to.
Yeah, well, I hope this is not an offensive comment to make, but I was going to say you're a fellow geek like myself. You love, it sounds as though you love messing around with technology, as I do as well. But the interesting thing, as you say, about data migration is, it's not very exciting. However, it is absolutely necessary, isn't it? And it's one of those precise things that you need to do as a managed service provider, which has led us to the conversation here today. So we'll talk a little bit more about the product and how it can help MSPs. But your company that you're referring to at the moment, CouchDrop, where are the rest of the team based? You're in New Zealand there. Are the team in New Zealand as well, or are you remotely distributed?
We're a bit of both. So most of the team is here in Christchurch, New Zealand, which is in the South Island. But we have a couple of people across in Vancouver, of all places. And then we've just brought up resource in Prague. So we've got a guy working on a product in our customer success team. And our customers are pretty much everywhere. So it's kind of a weird thing when we're talking about the company. We're a New Zealand tech company, but we don't really have any customers in New Zealand. It's people don't really get that. It's a very, very strange thing. Most of our customers are in North America and then over in the EU.
Yeah, I totally get it. But I'm going to rewind a little bit. I want to talk about the product itself, Movebot. I remember that before I sold my MSP business, and we're going back sort of 12, 13 years, obviously the MSP world then was mostly on site, like servers and workstations. But fast forward to the present day, of course, and nearly everybody listening to this show will know the situation is reversed, and the majority of business is, in the cloud nowadays. So we've got services, Microsoft 365, Dropbox, Google Workspace, and more. But when we first moved into this cloud world, we were promised something, a little something, I should say, called data portability. And it's come to the fore again recently. I think, the ability to easily move our data between cloud services was promised to us. However, that really hasn't happened, in my opinion. And moving data between cloud services can be a bit of a challenge, really. And that's the challenge you're looking to fix, isn't it, if I understand correctly, with Movebot. So tell us more about where the idea for Movebot came from, and tell us more about what the product does.
Well, the idea came from CouchDrop, which is this SFTP server that sits on top of any cloud storage platform. And we saw it just looking at what some of our tech partners and MSPs were using it for was migrations, and thought, well, that's kind of nuts. SFTP is not designed to do a migration. There's all sorts of caveats and constraints with it, and so we started looking at that problem and discovered that it was actually a lot bigger than we thought it was. And I was kind of surprised, to be honest. As you said, it's moving data between different cloud platforms seems like something that should be so trivial, and it just simply wasn't. And even doing it for ourselves a few times, it can be a bit of a nightmare. And so we sort of took CouchDrop and then we evolved it, and took some of the good parts, some of the technology abstractions and whatnot, and then built it into a platform which can migrate data at scale. And it doesn't, as you alluded to, it doesn't really end there, right? So we're starting to move in the direction of data lifecycle management and doing things like syncing between different cloud platforms, and also simple things like backups and whatnot. So if you want to take a snapshot of Google Drive in its current form and just pop it in S3 or in another storage provider, you can use Movebot to do that. And it's really all just about getting that data compatibility and moving it across whenever you want. I mean, a big part of migrations involves a lot of planning and a lot of care and a massive cost for both the MSP and the customer as well. The idea with Movebot is really to make it so easy that you just do it whenever your customer needs to do it, and it's really not something that you should be thinking about.
Yeah. And as you say, it doesn't sound a particularly exciting product. I mean, you're open about that. However, it is absolutely necessary. And I know the audience of managed service provider owners, technology businesses listening, if you've ever done a data migration, it can be fraught with challenges and it just ends up wanting to tear your hair out. So this is why I think this product is going to be so interesting to our audience. But we have got a global MSP audience here. Lots of MSPs, I think, out there using lots of different cloud services. So run us through the platforms the moment that Movebot supports the data migration.
Look, pretty much everything. It doesn't really work if we don't support everyone, right? So and we're extending that support as we go quite rapidly. So the most common platforms we sort of see is definitely Google Drive and the Office 365 ecosystem. But we of course support Dropbox. We support Ignite, which a few of the MSPs listening will probably be using. SharePoint, obviously. Office 365, Google Workspaces, and a lot of the smaller tools as well. So things like Huddle and BIM 360 and these sorts of platforms, which are a little bit more niche and certainly not so popular, but people need to move data in and out of them. And so we support them out of the box. And of course, if you've got that traditional move of on-prem servers, Movebot will also do that as well. It'll also go the other way. So if you're wanting to move data out of the cloud for whatever reason, and we see that quite a bit. Companies want to take a snapshot or a backup, or they've got too much data for the cloud. This kind of idea that the cloud is infinite and always works is a bit of a misnomer, and we do find companies often get kind of stuck there and have copious amounts of data, sometimes in the range of hundreds of terabytes, where they're just having to pay too much for it to reside in the cloud, and they're not using it terribly frequently. So they can use Movebot to actually get it back on-prem or get it into some storage like S3 or Wasabi or Backblaze, which is going to be far more far less costly and less cost prohibitive. And if it's not live data, if it's archives or stuff that's probably not going to be touched for a few years, then those sorts of storage platforms make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and interesting you talk about, the cloud is perhaps not the greatest fit for everybody, because we talked at the top of the our conversation about back in my day when I started out as an MSP, everybody was on site and then there was this stampede to the cloud. But actually there is mixed use cases there, isn't there? And the cloud isn't the best fit for absolutely everything. So thank you for touching upon that, and interesting you share it. I'm intrigued if we can get into the weeds a little bit here. You do support the migration of data from the cloud on site. How do you actually deploy Movebot? What's the technical requirements for that? Is it hosted locally, for instance? Is it something you run on a hosted virtual machine, or can you run it on site?
It's not hosted locally, so it's completely cloud side. One of the problems that we wanted to solve with building Movebot was removing the need for a lot of provisioning on your side as a customer. And also taking away the bandwidth constraints, CPU constraints, and whatnot that come with those migrations. Ideally, in an ideal world, everything in the cloud would be sort of push button. You wouldn't have to deploy anything. And for me, I really enjoy building simple products. And so we've built Movebot to be completely hosted. We look after all the infrastructure and whatnot for you. Which gives us quite an edge in that we're able to scale the platform that's actually performing your migrations for the migration automatically. And we're also, in different regions and whatnot, and we're in close proximity to some of the hosting providers that the major platforms are using. So it's highly optimized in that regard, and we really don't want you as an MSP to be worrying about, hey, do I have enough CPU on site to move this data, or, how am I going to get around the rate limiter or any of these things? And some of the other products that are out there for data migrations require, launching GCP clusters with, 5-10 machines, and that's, for me, personally, I think it's a bit ridiculous, right? You should just be able to jump into a nice web interface and go click, click, bam, and the data starts moving. Of course, it can be more complicated than that, but we certainly try to take all the details away and make it as simple as possible.
Simplicity is good. Simplicity is good.
Believe it or not, simplicity is harder, though. It's the misnomer, right? A simple product is only simple for the user on the outside. And then I would just note, in the case of, say, you're moving to and from an on-prem server, there's a couple of different ways you can connect to that, but the easiest way is actually, we do have a very, very light agent, which you would just run on that machine, and that connects to our cloud infrastructure. and then looks after the move for you on our site. Kind of operates like a pipe.
Very cool. You've explained that exceptionally well. And I think, you are the data migration wizard here. This is becoming clear to our listeners. So the simplicity angle, although there's a lot of work that goes into it, as you say, it's as it should be. I've been working in tech for an awful long time. I actually get frustrated now, if something is not simple to use. I'm a bit long in the tooth for it. So thank you for the work that you do behind the scenes to make it easy for us. You've talked about the different types of platforms that we can move between on-site and all the different cloud platforms and things. What type of data do you support moving? And that might sound a silly question, but when we think of data migration, we tend to think of files, but do you cover email, other types of structured data as well? What does that look like?
Well, for us, it's up until quite recently, it's been all about files. We kind of made a deliberate decision to stick with files and do files really, really well, because that was where we were seeing the challenge for MSPs. From what I could see, there's a lot of email migration tools in the market. There's a lot of ways you can move things like emails and whatnot. But there are not so many highly optimized and simple file transfer, file and folder migration tools. It's kind of like the ugly duckling. It hasn't really been solved very well. And so we built that first. We do have quite significant roots in file storage. So it was, CouchDrop being the SFTP server for cloud storage. It was kind of a natural fit. But late last year, we started seriously looking at email migrations, and we built out support for email migrations to and from Office and Google and IMAP and a couple of other providers, and we've followed that up now with calendars and contacts and a few other things. The big difference for us, though, is we are still treating emails and contacts and calendars like files. So you can actually take your inbox in Google Workspaces, for example, and dump it in S3 as EML files. And then 12 months later, you could choose to pull it back into Google Workspaces. And so we're taking a slightly different approach there to the rest of the market, and it's quite interesting. We're sort of flattening how you would do this, and we're also just treating it as data, and that we only charge for the data volumes that are being moved. So there's no sort of concept of a user or of an organization in total. It's how much data have you got in gig or terabytes, whichever comes first, and where do you want to stick it? And so it's a different sort of model, a different kind of mentality, and we're continuing to expand what we support and what we can move, with of course a focus on those key units, which is really files and then secondly emails and a few other things. Yeah.
Without breaking any confidentiality, I'm intrigued. Can you give me some recent examples of a good example of how some of your MSP clients have used Movebot? Anything interesting going on there?
It's used for all sorts of things. I mean, it's sort of normal file migration for us would be, between Google and SharePoint, definitely. And a typical sort of move is around 5 to 10 terabytes. That's pretty normal. But then on the mail side of things, we're seeing organizations go sort of again back and forth. Microsoft and SharePoint, Google and SharePoint seems to be the common combination there. But the customers are moving anything from a couple of users and just cherry picking a few people in an organization right up to moving thousands of users. And so it really varies, and it always tends to be at the last minute. So
yes,
so because migrations are kind of almost an afterthought. They're often lumped in with a bigger project or something. They tend to crop up at the very last minute, and with that can come some time crunches. I think we pride ourselves on being very, very quick, especially when it comes to file transfers. I think the kind of biggest single migration we've done was out of Google going into I think it was Backblaze, and it was clocking 35 terabytes a day, and they had 1.2 petabytes of data to move, and there was a bit of a wager going on in the office and with the client as to sort of when it would finish, because at a certain point it starts to get a bit ridiculous. It's fun being in the middle like that. You certainly get to see some stuff.
I'd imagine you do. Wow, that is a lot of data there. And I think any other MSP listening to this is going to be like, wow, that is probably not a project I really wanted to get involved in, but sometimes it gets thrust upon you, as you said.
Certain type of customers, right? Like you've got some MSPs are dealing with businesses like accountants and whatnot, and then others you have some specialist MSPs who look after media companies, and media companies just have a horrendous amount of data, and often they don't know what to do with it. Right? They've kind of got themselves into a situation where they've been using a particular provider for years, and the data's been effectively free, and they've just accumulated, and then they're left with the decision to move at some point in time. Either potentially it's a cost saving exercise, or they don't have good access to the data, and so they have to then shift it. And often that task can be cost prohibitive and really quite daunting, because no one wants to lose any data. That's a big problem. And as I said earlier, like it's believe it or not, it's not that simple to move hundreds of terabytes of data between providers. There's all sorts of catches that you've got to accommodate. And
yeah, I can well believe that it's not that simple. And speaking from experience as well, essentially the business that I run now is something of a media company. We do podcasts, we do videos, we move around an incredible amount of data. Now, I will say this, Michael, I wish I'd have met you, the data migration wizard, like 3 months ago, because we were in a situation where, we're a Google shop. We store everything Google Workspace, Google Drive there. And, essentially, we'd just been storing all of our data, all video interviews going back years and years and years. And Google got in touch and said, oh, yeah, we're changing our pricing model. And by the way, if you don't move this amount of data by the end of the month, we're going to hit you with a big fat bill, which you can imagine we weren't pleased about. So we had to scramble to move all this data into archive. And we did it, but it wasn't a pleasant job. So I wish that I come across, I can well believe what you're talking about, media companies. I know MSPs who deal with media companies, and I can well believe how difficult that sort of challenge is of moving petabytes of data. So good to know now for myself and listeners that Movebot makes that simple, even if the job underneath the surface isn't so simple. Yeah. I'm also imagining some of our MSP listeners have dealt with a scenario I've just thought of while we were speaking, and that is of a client going through an acquisition or a merger. And I think we all giggled a little bit when you said, it tends to be sort of last minute, and the client says, oh yeah, can you move all these petabytes of data by tomorrow morning for us? And you're like, what? The merger acquisition model, where two different businesses, two different sets of data, some overlap. Perhaps they need to merge data, from two instances of even the same service. Can Movebot help with that? How does Movebot help?
Yeah, absolutely. Like that's a big use case, right across the board, regardless of sort of how big or small the company is. So I mean, in that case, the actual process of doing the migration with Movebot or doing the transfer is fairly seamless. So you really just connect the source and the destination, pick the data you want to move across, and hit go. and we look after the rest, right? And in the case of a merger and acquisition, often it's not all the data that's coming across. So you may need to reorganize users, or potentially it's just a subset of the company. We see that quite a bit, where a large organization has sold a small portion of the business that was potentially working on one particular product. And so you only want to take a few of the users across it, and Movebot will allow you to do that, really quite simply. So it's a pretty seamless process.
Yeah.
As long as you don't leave it at the last minute, a day before the account's going to be terminated, then you'll probably be all right.
Well, something that's occurred to me, and I'm remembering back to my time, managed services and data migration. One of the big challenges for MSPs is pinning the client down to find the right time to move the data. And I know we've both been through that scenario where you say, hey, the client wants a job done, but they say, oh, yeah, but we've got to carry on working. Have you thought, and can Movebot help with MSPs migrating live data that's currently in use, and perhaps, I'm not going to say multiple migrations, but multiple passes at the data?
Yeah, so we can, and like traditionally, you would organize a cutover period and cutover window, and tell everyone, hey, stop working the data, don't do anything, go take a vacation or something. But that it's extremely prohibitive for the clients, and you don't have any margin for failure in that case. So the way that we deal with it is generally we tell customers not to mention that they're moving any data, and just let Movebot perform the copy operation in the background. And then once they're done, test and have a look, make sure the data is in the right place, everything looks okay. And then we go into what we call a continuous data cutover. So Movebot will actually look at the source and destination and identify changes, and then it will only move the data which is actually changed or been added. And so your cutover suddenly is far less of a problem, right? You can effectively move the vast majority of the data across and do sort of what we would call a lift and shift, where you just grab everything, pull it across, and then you can slowly start cutting over your users at a time which is convenient for them. You do that by effectively running a continuous sync between the source and destination that just ticks over in the background, and once you're done, you can stop running it, and away you go. So there's no big bang. That is is one of the problems. Businesses can't just switch off for a few days while an MSP performs a migration. It's just simply not practical, and the larger the organization, the worse it gets. So I mean, yeah, we've tried to solve that problem. I think we've done a pretty good job there. Whereas you traditionally would have had to do a lot more planning and whatnot. With Movebot, you can just set the move up, run it, watch it for a while. That initial sync will take a lot longer than the deltas, of course. And then once you're done, you go into this continued delta sync and start moving users across.
Wow. That could be a killer feature right there. So I'm old enough to remember trying to migrate, Windows domains and Microsoft Small Business Server. And there was a chap who was a bit of a legend in our industry, a guy called Jeff Middleton, who created a product called SBS Swing, which allowed you to move server in exactly the way that you mentioned, which is, instead of the big bang where it's like, right, we're cutting off and moving across, you could migrate over a period of weeks to do that. And it was such a game changer for MSPs at the time and for small business service specialists. And what you're talking about here that you've created with Movebot, that ability to do essentially the same, killer feature in my opinion, because every MSP listening to this is going to know that, trying to pin the client down to get the time to do this is really, really difficult. So that is an awesome feature, and kudos for thinking about that.
I think in general, MSPs, work almost a lot of the time in the background, right? And it's only when stuff goes wrong that they're getting the phone calls and whatnot. And I think like migrations again, the MSP should just be able to move data for their clients whenever it's necessary. It shouldn't be such a big obstacle because ultimately you want to be able to give your client the best tool for the job. And while there's two sort of clear major platforms in the space, Google and Microsoft with SharePoint, one is better at certain things than the other. And we see a lot of companies who have, especially the bigger teams, who have several different platforms in use for data storage and whatnot. And so you need to be able to reorganize that data and move it just to keep a clean house. And so it shouldn't be something which is difficult and time consuming. And ideally, it's just something that an MSP does in the background for the customer. And suddenly, data starts appearing where it should, and the customer's happy, and the MSP is not getting yelled at, not getting stressed, and it's getting on with the next sort of job or next service request.
More of that, and none of us like being yelled at. But data migration can be the one where it most likely to happen. I was just thinking, actually, pre-MSP for me, I worked in corporate IT and I managed dozens of systems with like high volumes of data. I was at companies like Ernst & Young and the NHS. So I can tell you from experience that when you're moving data, I needed to know what moved successfully and what went wrong. So I'm intrigued. What does the reporting on Movebot look like? Because sometimes there's stuff out of our control, isn't there? Bandwidth or connectivity losses or anything like that. And you can get yourself into a right pickle if you don't know what worked and what didn't. So what does the reporting in Movebot look like?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the biggest things with these migrations is dealing with failures, and dealing with failures automatically. And then when stuff really goes wrong and we can't move a file, surfacing it. So straight out of the gates, you can see it live through the web interface what's happening at a few different levels. You get logs if you really want to watch the logs. I think that can be kind of entertaining sometimes.
It can be quite mesmerizing, can't it, Michael? Yeah.
It can be. I think our customer success team spends a lot of their time in logs. But what we try and do is surface the stuff which is really important. So there's a lot of noise and a lot of small things that can go wrong during a migration, but most of them you don't have to worry about unless you're looking for a specific thing. So out of the gate, you're going to see critical failures, so files and folders that have actually failed to transfer outright. And by the time you're seeing a critical failure, we've tried to transfer that file at a minimum 20 times.
Wow.
And we've tried different strategies and whatnot to get that file across. And you get an error message from us that says, hey, we think this has gone wrong. And then we also provide a lot of details into what's happened in the underlying cloud storage engine. Because unfortunately, there's a lot of connectivity and a lot of random API issues that occur that are not predictable and not consistent, and the error responses that we get. And so, often we can't tell you exactly what's gone on or gone wrong because, the message we're getting back from Microsoft is complete garbage, or, so we surface all of that for you, but try and do it in a way which makes sense and is easy to deal with.
Yeah, thank you for
Ideally, there's no errors.
Ideally, but we don't live in an ideal world a lot of the time, do we? So
no, we don't. But it's getting better. Like, I think it's one of our key measurements, or one of our key metrics is the number of sort of failures in a migration. Because ultimately, the dream is that it's really, hey, I've got a folder here in Google, I want to drag it across here and dump it in S3, do it, tell me when it's done. I don't want to know anything about what's happening under the hood. Or, hey, I've got 1,000 users, I need to move, do it, don't tell me about it. And Movebot just goes in and executes it, and just goes and runs it, and away we go. So
yeah. So we've talked about the migration experience itself, and it sounds like the reporting and Movebot, you can go as granular as you want. I would be one of those people, by the way, that'd be staring at the log and getting slightly mesmerized by it. I find that very hypnotic. But again, speaking from experience, Michael, half of the battle of data migrations, or certainly the ones that I've dealt with, is preparing the data so it can be successfully moved across there. Can you tell me, does Movebot, can you help MSPs with pre-migration data preparation?
Yeah, so we have what we call a discovery scan, which is a useful tool even if you're not doing data migrations. And so what you can do is point Movebot at, say, a Google tenant and say, hey, I want to move this to Dropbox, for example. And there's a bunch of different things or a bunch of different incompatibilities between those two platforms, some of which you need to deal with and some of which we can deal with automatically for you. But even just the act of taking data in Google Drive, spread across maybe 20 or 30 different shared drives and putting it in Dropbox requires a bit of reorganization. The same if you were going from a file server into, SharePoint, right? A file server is not SharePoint. They have a totally different model, and so you need to move the data around. You need to sort of pick and choose where it's going to go in the destination. And so what we do from this discovery scan is give you a picture of all your data. So we tell you things like, hey, this particular folder is too big for SharePoint. You can't stick it there. We tell you if there's minor things like file name sanitization and whatnot required. We try and look after 99.9% of those conditions automatically for you, but we still surface it. So you kind of can look at the scan and go, okay, well, I've got 5 terabytes more data than I thought I had. That's kind of nice. That's going to be a bit of a problem. Going into SharePoint, but this is what my data looks like, and these are the things that I need to deal with and the problems that I need to solve before actually doing the migration. And so we try and surface it and push you to organize your data in a certain way, and we look for all the common issues, common constraints.
Very cool indeed. That's going to be very helpful. Half the battle half of winning the battle is doing the preparation, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, a migration is generally a really good opportunity for a bit of cleanup as well. Yeah. So we surface things like duplicate files and duplicate folders, and give you visibility over that sort of stuff. Where if the client's looking at moving, say, 5 terabytes of data across, and only 1 terabyte of that data is actually has been touched or is active, then potentially SharePoint is not the best place for it. And so rather than just dragging everything across, you can say, well, why don't we take everything that's been modified in the last year or 2 years across into SharePoint, and then we'll move data older than a year to a server or to S3, and these are the kinds of conversations which MSPs can have with their clients, and it's a massive cost saver. Yeah. But again, if you don't know what the data looks like, it's very difficult to actually make those decisions. And so the scan tool built into Movebot is incredibly useful for that, and really powerful. And it's free as well.
Wow.
So you don't pay for the scan tool. You just plug it in and away you go, and
that's amazing.
Hopefully move some data.
Hopefully move some data there. But as you say, like, the real value add that an MSP brings, though, is the ability to use that as an opportunity to speak to the clients about, okay, what data we need to keep, what needs to be archived, how can it be, rejigged at that point. So there is a lot of opportunity for the MSP to add value as well. I want to ask, obviously I'm in the UK, Newcastle upon Tyne at the moment. You're in New Zealand. You've stayed up late working after a really tough day to speak to me, which we appreciate. But we've already mentioned our audience is based for the podcast here all over the world. Can you speak to data compliance? We can't talk about data without data compliance and things. So things like GDPR here in Europe as well, other local data protection legislation. How do they fit in with Movebot?
They make my life very stressful.
Sorry to bring it up.
Yeah, I mean, we're a New Zealand company, but we don't have any infrastructure here. We're a New Zealand company purely by because we're Kiwis, at least most of us. But data sovereignty in Movebot is kind of your choice. So when you configure a project, you tell us where you would like the data to reside. And we have sort of micro data centers or points of presence in virtually every region. So, we have in Europe, we have a POP in London, we have a POP in Frankfurt and a POP in Amsterdam as well.
Points of presence that we're talking about.
Yeah, a point of presence. So when we deploy resources for your migration, which we do, in the background for you automatically, we will put it in a particular region, and your data doesn't leave that region. So it's as long as you choose the appropriate place, dependent on the regulations that you're trying to satisfy, you'll be fine. And as far as GDPR goes, we can sign DPAs and whatnot with customers, and in the in the US there's HIPAA and CCPA, and I think shortly every state in the US is going to have its own privacy regulations, which is going to be fun. Good time to be a CISO or an auditor, I think.
I would have said so, yeah. But it's good that you've thought about that. One of the companies that I'm a big fan of handles GDPR, regulations and stuff here in the UK. So I understand a little bit of what you're saying about that, about the DPA and the things of that nature. So Keepable is the product I'm speaking about in the UK, and we've learned so much about data regulation and legislation and things. So really good that you thought about it, because you'd be surprised to realize I speak to a lot of companies that work with large amounts of data, and they've only given a cursory thought to the data legislation implications. So really good that you've thought about that. But we're talking of time zones. Tell me more about Movebot technical support. So obviously data migration, as we've said, not the most exciting subject, but also super, super important. And one of the things that you've got to do right first time. So what does it look like if an MSP needs help or has a problem? What does technical support from Movebot look like?
Yeah, so we have support resources in Vancouver and now in the EU as well, out of Prague. For us, like the first few migrations with an MSP, we will work with you quite closely, and a lot of MSPs don't take us up on that offer, but it's a really good opportunity to learn the tool and to get advice about the broader picture around migrations. And we obviously build Movebot, so we know Movebot very, very well, but we see all sorts of different migrations and different scenarios and different problems that MSPs are encountering. So, going through that onboarding, those onboarding sessions and whatnot with your team, and working with us on the first migration that you do in the real world is a very, very important part, even though the tool is so simple. For support in general, we have sort of two tiers or two urgency senses. We have a Discord channel, we have email support and whatnot, and you can book time with our engineers. And then we have what we call premium support, which is kind of a get help right now sort of thing. And it doesn't matter what time zone you're in, effectively an on-call engineer in the worst case scenario will get pinged and we'll get woken up and we'll give you a hand with migration or with your particular problem. And it's quite an interesting challenge, trying to be a global business and have sort of 24/7 support for for MSPs and customers. But I think we do a pretty good job of it, and it's not something that you pay extra for or anything like that. It is it's something that comes with an MSP partnership, and support team is great. Like they really are top notch, and we're constantly sort of taking feedback from MSPs and from customers on the product, and that gets fed straight back into engineering and gets acted on. So yeah.
That's awesome, and that's what MSPs want to hear. They want to know somebody's the other end of the phone if it hits the fan, and
I know it's most obvious thing. Like, of course, when something goes wrong, you need to be able to talk to someone and to get a real solution, not be put through this sort of escalation process of first you get a level 1 guy and then you get a level 2 guy. Like, if you're working in an MSP, you know your stuff already, right? You're coming to us because you've tried, it's not working, and so we don't muck around. We are your partners in this, and our guys are very very, very capable and very experienced, and they're not level 1 certainly, and there's no gates or anything. It's
excellent.
You get help pretty quickly.
Get through to the people you need to speak to straight away, which is music to
and if you
MSPs.
If you've got something really curly or you're really in trouble, you might even end up with me on the other end of the line.
Well, based on what we've heard today, Michael, that would be an honor for most people, I think, given your knowledge of data migration here. To that point, most MSPs I know are notoriously time poor. Do you offer any assistance to MSPs who've got projects they may not be able to handle in-house at all directly? Can they outsource or speak to you about handling those projects entirely?
Yes, we do. So we have professional services. We don't. We try not to push it. And so, because ultimately, like our path to markets and our customers are MSPs. So we do have it as an offering. It is there, but most of the time, what we'll try and do instead is help MSP through the migration process, instead of 100% doing it for them and providing it as a service in itself. I think once MSPs realize how easy it is to use the tool, and once they've been through a migration with it, then it's not such a big obstacle. And then when there are issues, or there are caveats or things that an MSP doesn't know and that they're uncertain of, we're here, right? And we have a lot of channels where you can just fire off a question to us, like what do you generally see as far as performance for small files going into SharePoint from Google, for example, and you can find that off to us in Slack or Discord or via email, or book a call, and we'll work with you on that. So do offer it. We'll do the migration for you if you need that kind of service. But we really prefer to be working with the MSPs as opposed to doing some of their business, or
doing it for them.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing is Movebot's such an easy platform to get up and running with. I think people might be a little bit nervous about those data migration projects based on the bad experiences they've had in the past. But from what I'm hearing about Movebot, it's going to make life a whole lot easier because of the hard work you and the team have put in behind the scenes there. So yeah,
exactly, and that's the aim. Like it should just be point and click. Of course, it very rarely is, but the goal is to really do that and to make it as easy as possible. Because ultimately, like, we don't just want people using Movebot for migrations. I'm really, really keen on sort of making it so easy that it's less of a migration. It's more, hey, I've got some data here and I need it here because the customer is now working over here, and it makes more sense for that data to be in this system. And so it's just, okay, we can do that for you. And the MSP just presses a couple of buttons and away it goes. Yeah, it's kind of how it should be. And I think we do we do a pretty decent job of that, and we're continuing to build on the product and support.
You're going to have made a lot of fans as a result of this conversation here. A lot of people who are saying, hey, I've got the issues that you've spoken about. Movebot's going to be able to help me. Of course, we get down to like brass tacks then. So tell us a bit about what you charge for Movebot. How is it licensed to MSPs? What does the product cost look like?
It's generally just simply a per usage basis. We do have a subscription model as well, which effectively becomes a sort of all you can eat model. But most of our customers and most of our partners are using Movebot in a as you go sort of basis. There's no contracts or anything like that. There's no upfront costs. You effectively pay per gig. And that's right across the board. So if you're moving files or if you're moving emails, it's exactly the same model. And we do have an MSP partner program, which comes with discounts on our public rates and the option to use a subscription as well. And if you need something like the professional services aspect, then generally we look at that on a case-by-case basis. And we'll work with you to figure out what's going to work. The pricing is really meant to be straightforward. I mean, part of the issue with migrations is that it can be very difficult to actually estimate how much it is going to cost. Not only in terms of the time that an MSP has to spend on it, but also the product that has to be used. And we've looked at a lot of different pricing models per user, per team drive, and really, you just end up with a really complicated pricing sheet, and no one knows what they're going to be paying, and it doesn't scale very well. And traditionally, there've been some data migration tools that have charged $1.50, $2 a gig, which means you're going to be paying more for the data migration than you're potentially ever going to pay for the underlying storage. Which just doesn't make any sense, right? So, we've gone a lot lower in terms of that pricing. MSPs get a significant discount through our partner program. And then, if you're looking at a migration which is over 10 terabytes, you should talk to us because, the pricing does scale. I think it depending on how much how complicated it is and what sort of help you need, and it can scale quite aggressively when you start getting into the 20, 30, 40, 50 terabyte range.
We haven't mentioned how people can find out more about Movebot. So if people listening, MSPs, want to find out more about Movebot, where do they go? What's the website URL? How can they contact people?
Movebot.io is the URL. You hopefully see some pictures of our robot at IT Nation. I think, we're really easy to get a hold of. So if you want to have a play with the product, you can jump on our website and sign up. We give you 250 gig free, and if you need more, we'll give you more. It's as simple as that. Generally, it's good to actually run a migration and have a good play around with the tool, so that you get a gauge for your next project, and then you can reach out to either sales or support and book a call with us. And of course, you can join our Discord, which is actually a really good a good place to be, because you not only get to talk to us, but you also get to talk to other MSPs who are potentially having similar problems or doing similar migrations to you, and there's often advice sort of shared in that space as well.
We'll include, for the benefit of listeners, we'll include a accompanying blog post for this episode at tubblog.co.uk. We'll include the links to Movebot. We'll include the links to your Discord channel there. We'll include the links to CouchDrop, which we briefly mentioned as well, your SFTP solution as well. So I'm intrigued. What are your plans for CouchDrop, Movebot, and your whole business empire in 2024 and beyond, Michael?
Oh, good question. Still working that out. So, I mean, for Movebots, we, as I said earlier, we really want to change the paradigm a bit around migrations and moving data. Movebot can be used for more than just migrations, so it can be used for backups. It can be used for data cleanup and reorganization. And so really, we're just building the product and expanding it, making it better and simpler to operate and to fit in with these use cases. We have probably in the next 3 months, if everything goes to plan, what we're calling tasks coming up, and tasks will be a bit of an amalgamation of cleanup with in Movebots, but will include a backup task type. So you'll be able to use Movebot to take sort of a clean snapshot of the data every day or every week, and put that somewhere. And it's just building on the existing core there, and reusing that existing core and that functionality in a slightly different way, so that MSPs can use it to solve another problem.
Yeah. You are all about data. You are the data migration wizard. I said that earlier on in the call, and I think listeners will understand why. And so I appreciate it. And I should say, again, for the benefit of listeners, it's getting late in the evening for Michael. He's worked a full day. It's fairly early in the morning here in Newcastle, but I'm an early starter. Michael's had a hell of a day already. So Michael, I so appreciate you taking time out of your personal time to tell us more about Movebot and give us an insight into, wisdom around data migration. This has been a really fun interview for me. And I think you're going to make a lot of fans in the world of managed services who are going to want to check out Movebot. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. It was good to talk to you, Richard. Thanks for your time. And hope to be hearing from a few MSPs.
And I hope to see you, hopefully, you mentioned IT Nation, an event in the near future. I know we are literally on the sides of the world, but hopefully we get a chance to meet in person at some point.
That will definitely be possible. I think we'll be at IT Nation this year.
Wonderful. I look forward to it. Michael, thank you.
Cheers.
Hey folks, Richard here. Thanks for listening today. I know you've got a ton of options for who you listen to nowadays, so I really appreciate your support. Do you have any feedback on this episode? Ideas for future guests? Tweet me at Tubblog using the hashtag TubbTalk. I respond to every tweet and really appreciate your feedback.